Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. It's extremely cold and windy today, so I'm going to be filming this episode from the comfort of my car. We do have some snow on the ground, as you can see behind me, so that's kind of nice. In this video, I'm going to be adding 5 new birds to the Little Big Year list, including, believe it or not, yet another new warbler species. I'm also going to be talking about the Christmas bird count, which I participated in recently, along with a few of my birding buddies. Can you guess what area that we covered? You got it, Horn Pond, aka my home patch. Another thing I'm going to be talking about a little later in this video is a Little Big Year calendar that I've made. There's a link in the description below, and if you go to that link, you'll have the option to buy the calendar if you like, or to just look through it. But like I said, I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Okay, so let's get started by talking about that new warbler. So if you watched my last video, you know that a really amazing thing has happened here at Horn Pond, which is that 2 vagrant warblers from the west coast have showed up here at the same time. So that's a black-throated gray warbler and a Townsend's warbler. In the meantime, while birders were enjoying those 2 birds, particularly the more cooperative Townsend's warbler, a 3rd warbler was discovered, which was a blackpoll warbler. That's an eastern warbler, but it's still unusual to have it here in December. Shortly after my last video came out, something odd started to happen here, which is that people started reporting that there may actually be 2 Townsend's warblers in the same location. Now, of course, this would add another layer of improbability to this whole warbler situation, so that would really be crazy. Then a couple of weeks ago, some photos were taken that showed that the 2nd warbler was actually not a Townsend's warbler, but a Cape May Warbler. So Cape May and Townsend's warblers do have some similarities to the way they look. They both have yellow on the face and some streaking on the sides. As you can imagine, I was there on the spot the next morning, and I was able to rather quickly find and photograph the Cape May Warbler, so that was really great. Here it is, feeding along the small creek that runs along the wooded area where all these warblers have been seen. Now, Cape May Warbler is an eastern warbler, so it's not a vagrant, but it is one of the less common and therefore more desirable warblers here in Massachusetts. And until this fellow showed up, there had only been a handful of sightings this year on my home patch, which is typical. I had one of those sightings myself back in May, but I wasn't able to get any photo at all, so that couldn't be counted for my Little Big Year list. So this Cape May is bird number 151 for the Little Big Year list, and it's also warbler species number 25 on the list. What a great year for warblers it has been. Okay, so let's move on to the Christmas bird count. So this is kind of a big deal in the world of birding, at least here in the United States. So what it basically is a bird survey that's done each year when groups of birders go out into predetermined areas and count all the birds they see. So the number of species, and then also how many individuals of each species. So it is kind of like an eBird checklist that we would do today for a certain hotspot, but the Christmas bird count has been going on in all these areas for a very long time, since about 1900. So the backstory on this is kind of interesting. So it turns out that in the 1800s, there was a tradition in the United States, and probably in England as well, where on Christmas Day, you would go out and you would shoot as many birds as possible. And so you might have sort of a friendly competition with your neighbor to see who could shoot the most birds on Christmas and so on. And so a famous ornithologist named Frank Chapman proposed in 1900 that instead of going out and shooting the birds, why don't we just go out and count the birds? And this radical proposal actually took off, and it has really grown over the years. The way the Christmas bird count works is that there are count circles that are 15 miles in diameter, and these count circles get covered every year. This map from the National Audubon Society shows the location of all 2,000 plus count circles in North America. So then, by looking at the data over a long period of time, scientists can get an idea of what species are increasing, what species are decreasing, whether bird ranges are growing or shrinking, and so on. So a 15-mile diameter circle is actually still a really huge area, and so it's not covered by just one person or a couple people. You generally have multiple groups of birders that go out and cover specific areas within the count circle, And then at the end of the day, all the results are compiled into one master list for that count. Here's a map showing the count circles for the state of Massachusetts. And you can see that the circle known as the Greater Boston Circle has Horn Pond inside it. The count day for each circle is usually not actually on Christmas Day, but on a weekend day in the week or two leading up to Christmas. So on Sunday, December 15th, 5 regular Horn Pond birders, including myself, spent about 6 hours covering pretty much every inch of my home patch here at Horn Pond. And at the end of the day, we had a total of 52 species, which is a pretty good total for wintertime. I'll put a link to our eBird checklist in the description below if you want to take a look at that. So high on our priority list were these warblers that I have been talking about. Unfortunately, we were able to get the Townsend's warbler, the Blackpoll warbler, and the Cape May warbler on the list without much trouble. As I mentioned, all of these warblers have been hanging out in this little wooded gully that has a creek running along the bottom, which is ideal for an overwintering warbler. I actually got a shot of the Cape May and the Blackpoll foraging right next to each other in that little creek. Horn Pond is known as a good place to see waterfowl, and we had a good day in that regard. Most of the waterfowl that we saw were on the main pond because the back lagoons and other places were frozen over. Here's a group of ruddy ducks that we saw. These are the sleepiest ducks in North America, in my opinion. We also recorded 300 Canada geese, 300 mallards, 40 hooded mergansers, 10 common mergansers, 10 ringneck ducks, 8 black ducks, 3 gadwall, 3 mute swans, and 2 bufflehead. Here's a pair of ringneck ducks relaxing in some still water in a protected cove. We also saw the 80 or so American coots that overwinter every year at Horn Pond, which are water birds but technically not waterfowl. Moving on now to the land birds, a nice pickup that we got early in the day was this yellow-bellied sapsucker. Sapsuckers are generally around in the fall and winter in small numbers here, but they are much less conspicuous than other woodpeckers and are hard to find. In fact, I do not have yellow-bellied sapsucker on the Little Big Year list yet, so let's add it right now. This is a better photo that I took back in January. I was hoping to get some video at some point, but that hasn't happened and time is running out. So that is number 152 for the list. The biggest surprise of the day was a brown thrasher that popped up for us. This thrasher was a great bird that I added to the Little Big Year list back in October in episode 14. But at this point, it hadn't been seen for 6 weeks, so it was really a shock when it showed up on count day in exactly the same location. This red-breasted nuthatch was another nice pickup, as they've been quite scarce this year. Of course, we really wanted to make sure to get barred owl on the count list, as they are a Horn Pond specialty. We ended up seeing 3 of them, including this nice open look here. Another really nice bird from the Christmas count that I was particularly excited to see was this sharp-shinned hawk. Not only just a sighting, but a nice extended look as it sunned itself on an open perch. I'm sure you can guess why I was particularly excited to see this bird. That's right, it's bird number 153 for the Little Big Year list. Sharp-shinned hawks are notoriously difficult to separate from the larger and much more common Cooper's hawk. On this Sharpie, you can see the very small bill and the relatively short and squared-off tail. Red-tailed hawks are the most common raptors at Horn Pond, and we ended up with 5 of them on the list. It's always tricky deciding how many to put on the list when you have multiple sightings throughout the day. Here are 2 of them side by side, one on each pole. This swamp sparrow was another good sighting, as they are scarce in the wintertime. Mockingbirds were plentiful. We ended up with 6 of them on the list. A couple other good birds that I did not photograph were a late ruby-crowned kinglet and a herd-only winter wren. Okay, so that Christmas bird count was on December 15th, which is exactly 1 week ago as I'm filming this. More recently, in fact, just yesterday, another really good bird showed up on the main pond, which is a common loon. This is a bird that shows up sporadically at Horn Pond, often staying only for a few hours and then leaving. I did have one sighting earlier this year with some very distant photos that I didn't really think were good enough to count on the Little Big Year list. So this bird here really bailed me out. That is number 154 for the Little Big Year list. Shout out to my friend Ed for spotting this bird and letting me know right away. I even got some footage of this loon eating a fish or an eel that it caught, which is pretty cool. Okay, so there is one more new bird that I want to add to the Little Big Year list now, and that is common goldeneye. Unfortunately, this is not a recent sighting. The photos that I'm showing here were taken back in January and February of this year. That was before I started making these videos in March, but it still counts on the list as number 155. So, as I mentioned earlier, one more thing I want to talk about in this video is the Little Big Year calendar that I've made. If you click on the link below in the description, it takes you to the Shutterfly website where you can purchase the calendar or you can just sort of look through it and see what it looks like. I've used Shutterfly for several years now to make calendars for my friends and family, and I've always been reasonably happy with the quality of the calendars that have come out. Here's an example of what the inside of the calendar looks like. This is for the month of May. And you can see that there's one large photo on the left, which is obviously where I put my best photos, and then 4 smaller photos along the right. So there are 12 large photos and 48 small photos, all from my Little Big Year. Also, in small print across the bottom, there's a running list of all the birds in the order that they were shown in the videos. Just 2 more quick points to make about the calendar. The first one is that this is not a merchandising thing where I get some of the money that you spend on the calendar. In fact, if you buy a calendar, I don't even think I will know about it from Shutterfly. So if you do decide to buy a calendar, please do message me and let me know what you think of it. The other point I wanted to make is that Shutterfly is one of those sites that is always having sales and online coupons and discount codes and things like that. So be sure you look for those before you pay. It's not a site where you ever want to pay full price for anything. Okay, so regarding the Little Big Year, I'm planning to make one more wrap-up video that will come out in early January. I also need to figure out what comes next, what I'm going to do with this channel going into 2025, so you can expect me to make some sort of update about that fairly soon as well. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.